the thread that I really liked going through the book was all these books that you managed to find about MS and people's accounts of MS and their own biographies and so on. I had no idea. That's not something I've ever looked into. So you're obviously an academic, and so research is your forte. Would you say that having all of that was sort of a big part of your journey, and did that help you personally?
Yes, I think it did, because we all need company, don't we? We need friends. And sometimes the company and friends that we look out for aren't people we necessarily know. And writers and books can be that kind of company. And sometimes it's just realizing that other people have gone through the same sorts of things that you have. And they don't have to be real people. They can be fictional people. And the good thing about fiction is it gives you stories with conclusions. So you can see what possible outcomes there might be. And then you can rehearse those things in your head and mentally prepare yourself for them, whether it's a comedy or a tragedy or a mixture of the two. So is it going to be a happy ending or a sad ending? Or, as with most life, it's going to be a mixture of the two. And what reading then, and especially these MS stories, gives you is a way of seeing both possibly the best outcome, possibly the worst outcome, and then to mentally rehearse possible attitudes towards those things, so you're not kind of helplessly surprised by them when they happen to you.
Yeah, I found that this parallel story, this of Bruce Cummings, was just incredible. I mean, I'm really interested in coincidences. I'm reading a book at the moment about coincidences, and I just finished another one. And when we look out for them, they're there all over the place. But the fact this book almost jumped off the shelf at you, and that you bought it not because it was about somebody who had MS, because it was before your diagnosis, and then that's what it was about, his journey. And he, although it was quite devastating, the impact that it had on him, and of course in a time when there were no DMDs at all and you were just effectively left to get on with it, he managed to keep a sort of wry humour about his journey the whole way through, and you've definitely done that in your book too. So humour is obviously a really important thing for you, as it has been with us, with our journey as well. So tell me a bit more about that.
So yes, I mean, I think in the book I say that a sense of humour is just another way of saying a sense of proportion. And what humour then gives you is a way of lifting yourself out of the situation and seeing it from the outside, as well as experiencing it from the inside. And the reason I'm calling this a slapstick misery memoir is that slapstick is a kind of comedy in which you go through all kinds of physical disasters, but without ever being fully affected by them. If I can be academic about it, there in Hegel, the philosopher Hegel, in his lectures on aesthetics, says that the comedian walks through the world utterly consoled in advance of all its disasters, which means that as a comedian, then you know that there will be consequences, but not meaningful consequences. You will fall over the banana skin, but you won't bruise or bleed. Now, of course, that's not true of someone with MS, because if you trip over and you have MS, you will bruise and you will bleed. And I've done both of those things. But it does mean you can rehearse a slightly more kind of measured response to those things, and realize that it can be, as well as being serious and difficult, it can also be quite funny.
Yeah, it's not what you'd expect, is it, necessarily, to find humour in a book about multiple sclerosis? But definitely there are lots of moments. There are a couple of laugh out loud moments, I thought.
Well, I was really hoping to get a tone that kind of made people realise that if MS is a disease that doesn't really have a story or no one fixed story, it definitely doesn't have a genre. It definitely doesn't have, it's not a kind of tragedy, it's not a kind of romance, it's all of these things all kind of mingled and mangled together. And I wanted to kind of get that sense of a kind of sort of the hybrid nature of MS as a disease
Yeah.
within the writing itself.
Yeah, because it covers so many different emotions, doesn't it? And the other writers picked all of that up as well, which was fascinating. As I'm reading through it, I'm thinking, oh, that looks like an interesting one. That looks like one that's worth reading as well. So my book list has grown through reading this book as well.
Good.
Also, you touch on something that I think has been really, really important to us on our journey, in sort of this sense of gratitude. I was talking to James about this last night in bed and saying, you know, that you'd said that now you wake up and it's my vision. Yeah, my vision, it will come back into alignment shortly. And, you know, is this working? Is that working? And so on. And the sense of gratitude that it's there. And he said, yeah, he said, you know, some mornings I wake up and I'm just feeling grateful that I am still here. So it's definitely sort of given us a perspective that I don't think we had before. I think maybe we thought we had it, and people talk very cliched about seizing the day and living for the moment, that kind of thing. But I think until something like this happens to you that's so transformative, it's hard to totally understand that. And I think now we have got a very different perspective on that. Would you say it's the same for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, transformative is the right word, and the reason I call the book Metamorphosis is yes, and it's not just because it's a word that begins with M and ends in S. But also because it does not only transform your body and your brain, but also it does transform the way you think about those things and about your place in the world. And I know that people often with cancer say that they didn't really understand how to live until they realized that they were going to die. And now Dennis Potter famously talks about blossom, and the blossomingest kind of blossom that he has ever seen when he knows he's close to death. But because MS is more of something that feels halfway between a life sentence and a death sentence, it allows you to not only kind of grab the moment knowing that it could be coming to an end fairly soon, but also it might not be coming to an end fairly soon. But that's not to say that you can't therefore take the same attitude towards life that you would as if it were. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Perfect sense, definitely. I think one of the things that we find ourselves, or certainly that's really resonated with me, is it's interesting because you've got it in the book there with Bruce Cummings, is that there really was nothing doing for him at all. And I often say to James, aren't we so lucky? I mean, we're incredibly lucky that we got HSCT on the NHS for one thing, because he would not be accepted now. He would not meet the criteria. It was really before the floodgates opened and there was as much knowledge as there is about it now, which is still minimal, but it was before that criteria, before they were tightened up. And so, you know, if you'd have been born 50 years earlier than you were, they would have just said hard luck and get on with it, which was really kind of where we were at the start of our journey with secondary progressive MS. Sorry, there isn't anything at the moment. We'll tell you if there are any trials. So to sort of be at a point now where there are things that are able to slow it down or halt it, or help the symptoms, is an incredible thing. And so for that, we feel really, really grateful, which is a funny place to be in, because nobody wants MS, but we end up feeling really grateful for the things that it's brought us.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I recognized very early on, and it surprised me, is that we tend to assume that medical knowledge is close to perfect.
Yes.
And that there are ways of treating almost everything, even if individuals don't always respond to those things, but there are at least options, treatment options. It astonished me that MS is still one of those diseases which, it's not a blank book, but it's a book with many of the pages ripped out and many of the pages scribbled over, and some of the pages are the wrong way around or upside down. And even neurologists who know a lot about the functioning of the brain in terms of how synapses fire and how damage accrues and so on, know very, very little about not only what happens, but why it happens. We still don't know. We still don't know what is the underlying cause? What is the trigger? What is the prognosis? What patterns of disease will happen to particular people at particular moments? We simply don't know. Everyone is as unique as a snowflake when it comes to MS.
Yeah.
And that means it's very difficult then to discuss it with even expert neurologists, because they can only go on aggregate outcomes. And of course, if your particular situation is unique as it is, measuring your symptoms and your against the aggregates is always going to be very problematic.
Of course. We'd had a little bit of a taste of that before James was diagnosed with MS, because both of our daughters have got neurological conditions. Our eldest daughter had epilepsy for a while, and then the youngest daughter was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. So we sort of had quite a lot of stuff to find out there. And so we knew early on that actually they don't know as much about the brain as they've still got to discover about it. But when he was diagnosed with MS, my goodness, then we really found out, because the whole purpose of AIMS, really, or a big part of AIMS, is self-advocacy and asking those questions, and if not doing the research yourself, getting somebody who can hold your hand and do that research for you.
And it's doing really important. That's one of the reasons I'm so grateful for AIMS. It's doing really important work there. I mean, we talk about gratitude. I'm very lucky, not only in that I had a brilliant GP who recognized very early on that there was something a bit funny going on, and that I had private insurance that allowed me to see a good neurologist very, very quickly, and that I could therefore have the scans, and
Yes.
That could have taken a couple of years rather than a couple of months.
Easily.
But also then that what you were saying about advocacy. I am very lucky in that I have enough kind of, I don't know, what's the word, cultural capital or clout?
Yes.
Or social confidence, or all the other things that come with being an academic in a place like Oxford.
Yeah.
That allows me to, to talk to people as peers and to ask them for their advice and to expect to get good answers.
Yes.
If I didn't have any of those things, I would simply assume that the doctors knew best, and I would curl up and wait to be told what to do. And that's never likely to produce the kind of results which I had, because I had to be, my own doctor to some extent.
Exactly. And we keep saying to people, nobody, even the best doctor in the world, has not got the same interest in your health as you have, because it's personal, knowledge. Incredibly personal thing. Or the knowledge. And instinct is a really powerful thing as well, isn't it? How many times do we hear stories of people that have gone back to the GP many times because something isn't quite right, and then they've been dismissed? We see it with MS, but we see it with other things all the time in daily stories. But the MS, the self-advocacy thing is so important, because it's again coming back to the title of the book. It strips away your identity. I mean, for you as somebody who is an academic, suddenly finding yourself in a position where you couldn't get the words out, and for James, my husband, was very, very sporty, loved playing football, still, I think even now he's not quite given up at 52 the idea that one day he might play for Liverpool, but that sort of thing, not being able to just walk up to the shop and get the paper, that it really takes away so much of your identity, doesn't it? So the advocacy thing was really important. We wanted people to know, look, we're here for you. We'll sit in with you on the neurologist's appointment with you if you want us to do that, because they're so often on the back foot, because it's taken away cognitive ability or confidence and so on. So for us, AIMS is really important to help people to have that conversation with the neurologists, who are often very much against HSCT. So again, you were really lucky to, was it Malik that you had? Was it Dr. Malik?
It was ultimately, yes. So I saw Alison Parry, who mentioned nothing about HSCT, and then I kind of referred myself on to Malik.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did, because luckily we were in a position where James's neurologist knew Dr. Turner quite well, and they were friends. So although she wasn't necessarily going to advocate for James, yes, you must have HSCT, she was quite happy to refer him and sort of put him into Dr. Turner's hands because she trusted him and so on. And then we went from there. So we saw Dr. Turner, and we got a private appointment with Dr. Kazmi, because we knew these are the doctors that we need to see. So that was sort of how it started for us. But definitely, if we tried now, no way at all, because he didn't have the active lesions or the new T2 lesions that are critical to it. So, but for him, it has halted the progression, and there is more and more research that's coming out all the time. There was a paper just in the last couple of weeks that was talking about the implications for progressive MS as well. So I think the more that we go on, and talking to Dr. Burt a few weeks ago as well, I don't know if you saw the interviews that
Yes, I did. Yes,
I did. So that was fascinating. And he's certainly confident that with progressive disease, perhaps HSCT isn't going to be the right route by that point. But he seems pretty confident that there are going to be plenty of things that are coming out, which again, it just makes you so grateful that we're living in the time that we're living in.
No, I mean, I think the note of caution there would be that the wind seems to be blowing within the NHS through the STAR-MS trial against people with primary progressive MS.
Yes, definitely.
And because those are the criteria for the study, I suspect what's going to happen is that when the results come in, which they almost certainly, they will show what we expect them to show, which is more than 90% of people will have their disease progression halted. My guess is that will then be the criteria for.
Yeah, you can see it coming.
but it will then still leave people with primary progressive MS in limbo, because they will then be, will be officially excluded from HSCT rather than being included on compassionate grounds as they used to be.
I mean, London produced a paper a couple of years ago now that was talking specifically about progressive patients. So that was useful data to have out there. But yeah, certainly Sheffield, who are running the trial, have always been very much on the, no, it doesn't work for progressive MS, which is also what Dr. Burt's line is. And so it's not surprising, because they were involved in the MIST trials, and so it doesn't work for progressive MS. And I think that's the stance that they will continue with. And this is why they're sort of focusing on what they're focusing on.
But as you said in a number of your other places, it depends on what you understand by success. If success is defined as reversing disability and restoring people to their prior state, then it's not. If success is stopping people from progressing and ending up much worse much more quickly, then of course. But those tend not to be the measures